Welcome back to the OHL podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome to your premier source for Ontario Hockey League information. And while you're here, hey, take a moment, like, subscribe, tell a friend that you just found this OHL podcast thing and you think that Dan Mahar and Mike Farwell are kind of knowledgeable, okay, not so knowledgeable morons. You tell them about the morons you found on the OHL podcast thing and have them come along and tell us what morons we are. I think that's about sums up the podcast, doesn't it, Dan? Two morons talking about junior hockey.
Every week I like to be reminded. So yeah, it's good. It's good. We'll keep them coming.
I can just hear some of our most loyal listeners or viewers right now chuckling and starting to send the emails to ohlpodcast@rogers.com. Oh, you guys are morons, all right. Remember when you said this? Remember when you said that? And by the way, make a note because later in this episode, Dan and I will tell you exactly where the OHL is going to expand. Because you see, couple of morons like us, we've got it figured out. We know the four markets. You see?
Yeah, and if we do need a summer episode, Mike, one of those viewers noticed the hockey table in the background and how they were red and blue, and said that you and I need to have a showdown, Habs versus Leafs. And there's a slightly old, overpaid blue one on that table right now, where the rod doesn't move quite as fast as it once did. It's locked up for 8 years, so you're gonna have a real advantage on the right D when you play me. But no.
Wait a minute. Wait, you're throwing that on former Erie Otter Darren Radish right now? It's so funny because I thought about it, and as a Leafs fan, I'm like, okay, I think I want to like this, but when you're signing him off his career year, doesn't that usually mean like you're buying high, Toronto Maple Leafs? You're buying high.
They are, and free agency is a quagmire for that reason, right? You're gonna probably eat some bad years at the end of the road, but I'm just giving you a hard time. I was on this podcast a few weeks ago saying that I thought Darren Radish was one of the top 5 to 10 D in the league this year, and if you get a couple of those years in the shorter term, you're fine. So just giving you a hard time, as I'm obligated to do.
All right, Darren Radish and Erie Otters fans, Dan thinks you're fine. Just you're
Yeah.
fine, okay? And we all know what fine means in the grand scheme of things. Okay, we've told you to like, we've told you to subscribe. I'll remind you of that. And hey, get in touch anytime. I'll share the email address again, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. You'll find Dan on X. We love to interact with you on social media. So Dan is at his name, Dan Mahar. I am at Farwell_OHL. Leave a comment on our YouTube channel or on the podcast player where you listen to this. Again, we're happy to interact. We love talking about junior hockey. And real quick, shamelessly, but one more thing that is always associated with going to a hockey game or any sporting event for that matter is the lovely 50-50 draw. I have been playing these things every game for I don't even want to count. I think it's 25, maybe 26, 24, whatever, 20 plus years in this league. I've never won a 50-50 in my life, but it doesn't stop me from playing them. And I know you might like to do it too. So I do a fundraiser for cystic fibrosis research every spring, and there's a 50-50 that you can participate in. So just go to cf5050.ca, cf5050.ca. Our jackpot is over $100,000. That means your take home is more than $50,000. I think that's reason enough to visit the website, cf5050.ca. Don't do it for me and my charity. Do it for your bank account, okay? And sorry to our friends in Erie and elsewhere. This is Ontario only, but if you're in Ontario or you know someone in Ontario, cf5050.ca. Dan, do you have your tickets yet?
Well, I was just going to say, so my buddy Josh, who's probably listening right now, has won at least 2 or 3 times the 50-50 draw at Ranger games.
Get out.
5-figure wins. I'm getting him to buy my ticket for me. So you fans in Erie who can't buy one in Ontario, I'll send you Josh's contact and he's going to buy him for you. He's got the touch.
Let's dive into the news around the Ontario Hockey League this past week, Dan. And even though the season is over and we're getting into orientation camps and getting ready and looking ahead to next season, the Guelph Storm are not resting on their laurels by any stretch of the imagination. And we knew there was work to be done with the roster in the Royal City because they are Memorial Cup hosts next season, after all. And George Burnett has been busy. How about Ryan Rubrick, the latest piece to the championship puzzle for the Guelph Storm, coming over from the Niagara Ice Dogs for Lane Gallagher, Will McFadden, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. I will just quickly say our apologies to Lane Gallagher because we were singing his praises as perhaps an undervalued asset in Guelph, and now he's on his way to St. Catharines in this trade. But this, Dan, is a big one.
It is. And, there was some buzz around Ryan Rubrick for a while because things weren't going as smoothly as they could be in Niagara for him. And there was talk that he would be headed to London this summer. And we knew there were some discussions that had occurred. London maybe kind of got cold feet just because there's, if you look at the NHL draft rankings, we'll just call it like it is, Ryan Rubrick's stock has fallen a little. And there's been questions around compete, consistency, some of those factors. But boy, when he's on, he is on. And you move through those age ranks we talk about all the time in the OHL, and as a veteran player in this league right now, I think he is ripe for an explosion. You look at his size, you look at his skill level, he can take over games when he wants to. So when you look at what was available to Guelph on the market, and with all due respect to Gallagher, McFadden, and then those picks, none of which were a second round pick, the price is quite reasonable for a player of Ryan Rubrick's ilk. So I think it's a great move by George Burnett. I think that Guelph Storm offense, that weak power play they had, now is looking a lot stronger based on the additions they made in the last week. So I think this is one where red flags or question marks aside, I think it's nothing other than a great move for Guelph.
It's interesting that you mentioned the question marks around Ryan Rubrick at times and where his draft stock currently is. You and I will talk more about the upcoming NHL entry draft and the OHL'ers we expect to go high in it. But I was a little bit surprised at some of the projections that I saw that have Rubrick falling to as far as the third round, for example. And many are saying that what the Guelph Storm got in this deal is a guy that could, perhaps will, lead the OHL in scoring next season. So interesting that he might be a third round guy in the NHL draft this coming weekend, but more on that in a moment. Something else you touched on, Dan, and that is not using a second round pick, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. Two players, one of which we talked about last week, and we really like, not taking away from Will McFadden, but we were pretty big Lane Gallagher fans. Nothing against those guys, but they weren't going to be likely top six players on this Storm roster. So you're trading a couple of bottom six guys and you don't use a second round pick. Did George Burnett just fleece new Ice Dogs GM Dale DeGray here?
It's hard to, without knowing everything that's gone on behind the scenes. It's hard to know because sometimes players request moves. Sometimes there's just a fracture with the team that can't be repaired, and everyone knows he has to go, and he has a limited number of teams he'll go to, or things like that go on that kind of impact prices. And we all know when teams are competing for championships too. I know no one wants to talk about the two-part move and things that could happen down the road, but maybe sometimes there's like a future considerations wink on these trades. So there's other factors that could impact the price, but at the surface level, based on what we see and what we know, I would say that yes, George Burnett got great value in this deal, and a player with that profile, with that projection for this year, is a huge piece to add to the Guelph Storm lineup. And like you said, with McFadden and Gallagher, as good as they are, as you keep adding these players, their role is going to be diminished anyway. So just a great move for Burnett.
They'll get a chance, McFadden and Gallagher particularly, to shine in Niagara then with an increased role, obviously. You talk about the wink, the nod, the second part of a deal, perhaps. I'm feeling like my limb is less and less sturdy with my Caleb Malhotra conspiracy theory, Dan. I don't know that you're putting Malhotra on this team now. I was convinced there was a second part of that deal that sent Jet Luchenko to Brantford last season.
Yeah, we both were. I'm going to own that one too. And until the puck drops next fall, we don't know 100% sure. But yeah, it's looking less and less likely. But even so, with that Luchenko deal, did that impact the Dravecky deal that came to Guelph? I mean, there was a follow-up deal, and obviously not the same profile as a Malhotra, but maybe they have plans B, C, and D if that didn't work out. So it doesn't mean that there wasn't necessarily a quid pro quo there. It just means that we were maybe a little bit wrong on the Malhotra one.
You mentioned how this will obviously improve the Storm's power play. The offense looks very good. I mean, you're likely looking at a top line in Guelph next season of Ryan Rubrick, Tyler Hopkins, and Ethan Zada. You've got Owen Griffin as a second line center. There is nothing wrong with that at all. And not using a second round pick in this trade, I think George Burnett still has enough in the chamber to pull off one more significant move once the 2026-27 season gets underway. So the Storm are absolutely well positioned. You mentioned Drevetsky. We talked about him when that deal was made. It helps make up for the loss of Quinn Beauchesne, who went to the NCAA from the Storm's blue line. I still think that's the area of need right now in Guelph. I believe in building championships from the net out. And we touched on the Storm goaltending last week. It's adequate for sure. Is it great? I'm not certain, but you put a good blue line in front of them, and then adequate is more than enough for a championship. But I still think that's the area that the Storm would like to address with this next significant move that they will certainly make in the season ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I saw some wild conjecture online from some OHL folks talking about, well, are they saving a bullet in the chamber if Brady Martin is returned, and could Jacko Wysick be involved going the other way, and certain dreaming scenarios like that. But I look at the roster the exact same way you do. I said if there's going to be another move, it's going to have to be on that blue line. I think they're got to be looking for, with all due respect to the players that are there and that they've brought in. I think that the loss of Beauchesne, you look at the blue lines that win Memorial Cups, and they're still a little bit south of where they need to be. So I think that's the next move as well.
One more thing on this before we move on, and that is, again, not taking away from, and the caliber of the players that George Burnett has acquired speaks for itself. Ethan Zada, Ryan Robrick, Owen Griffin, etc. I always think back to a conversation I had in a media room many, many years ago, and I've brought it up before, Dan, on this podcast. It's around the trade deadline. And this particular conversation with a group of scouts was around the idea that the best players to get when you're shopping at the trade deadline are the players who are not yet signed to their pro deals because they've got more motivation, perhaps, was the idea in that second half of the season to play deep, to show what they've got, to earn that contract, etc. And, I can get behind that theory. I think it makes sense to a lot of people. Connected to that, I would say with these deals, as talented as the Griffins and the Zadas and the Rubreks are, I think that if you want to be a champion, you want to have champions on your team. And it's not always going to be the case. The Kitchener Rangers, a prime example of that this past season, when they trade for champions O'Reilly and Woolley, and then the Rangers become champions with those previous champions. But you're grabbing guys, talented as they are, and I'm not trying to be unkind here. I'm just trying to be realistic. The Niagara Ice Dogs for years have been a mess. We've been beating on them pretty hard on this podcast, and it's not just us. Around the Ontario Hockey League, the entire organization has left us wanting for a number of years now. So great, you're getting guys out of a bad situation. Maybe they shine and thrive once out of that bad situation, but these guys don't have a pedigree that says, I'm taking you 4 rounds in the playoffs. If there's a red flag, and again, forgive me, I'm not trying to be unkind, but if there's a red flag, that's where I see it with these deals.
Yeah, and it's a fair point because you would like to have that in the dressing rooms, that proven championship pedigree. And that's why some teams, OHL teams, when they're doing the U16 draft that we just saw, the priority selection, they look for kids that had championship background in their past couple of years in minor hockey. Having said that, those players don't grow on trees. They're not easy to acquire. There's only a handful of them you can get any given year, and you're competing with other teams. And it's a lot of guesswork too, because I remember when the Kitchen Rangers acquired O'Reilly and Woolley this year, I did hear some whispers around the fan base of, well, they've been to 2 straight Memorial Cups. They already won one. Are they going to be motivated to do it for a rival this year? So there were whispers on that side as well. So clearly those 2 gentlemen answered that in spades throughout the playoffs. But it's still a bit of guesswork. So I'm with you that it would be nice to have that. But when you look around now, so you're talking about looking at the Kitchen Rangers roster. who there could we potentially pilfer? Well, there's the options get a little bit thin in terms of the market. So I'm with you. It's just easier said than done.
Clearly, George Burnett has been busy. He's been making some very good deals. And it's interesting that you would allude to the Rangers roster and any opportunities there for the Guelph Storm as we take a look at some other news and notes from around the league this past bit. And one of them involves a now former, I guess, Kitchener Rangers defenseman. Boy, Cameron Reed would have looked really nice. We were just talking about the need on the blue line for the Guelph Storm, but Cameron Reed, along with Kane Barch, commit to Michigan, and the Saginaw Spirit grab Brady, or is it? Yeah, it's Brady Noling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Noling,
Yeah.
out of the U.S. National Team Development Program. So some player movement and some signings there in terms of the Saginaw Spirit. And I know you wonder what that means for one of the busiest guys in the OHL last year, in Stepan Shurigan in Saginaw.
Yeah, well, Shurigan was really when he was on, he was amazing last year, and he gave Saginaw a chance in a lot of games they really had no business. And so he's a number one goalie. He's proven it already. So how happy is he going to be when you have a high end guy like Brady Nolan looking for the majority of the minutes? So is that a piece they can shop on the market? Most likely, I think, but we'll see. They could stick to the best tandem probably in the OHL. But yeah, the Reed news and then the Kane Barch news. Still waiting for a few details on Barch, whether the commitment really is for this year or he's going to play in the OHL and then return. So a few gray details there. But yes, the commitment from Kane Barch. And then Cameron Reed, like, so it's the new landscape, right? I think it probably is a wise move for him. 3 years in the OHL, has got his championship, needs to, maybe play against some men this year, might not have that shot in the AHL. So probably a logical step, but it's the new landscape for OHL GMs that you might be looking at a piece like this as a way to refill that cupboard, return some of those assets you gave away in your championship run, but you can no longer count on that because those players have moved on. So blow for the Kitchener Rangers, but it's just one of many blows for the OHL that we've seen in the last year.
Well, and I wanted to take that just half a step further because while we are waiting for some of the gray areas in the Barch commitment to be sorted out, the blow to the Ontario Hockey League, this is having a player defect, if you will, or choose the NCAA over the OHL. When a player is doing that while also being presented with the opportunity to play with the juggernaut and development factory that is the London Knights, that is a telltale sign for me, Dan.
It really is. I mean, there's so many aspects to this, but yeah, if the London Knights cannot convince you to commit in your 18-year-old year, that's a problem. Uh, every case is unique, but it's funny. Like, there's the long-term implications of all this are vast, are they not? So in that sense, yeah, if London's starting to have trouble recruiting, then God knows what it is for every other team. But also on the NCAA side, like, one of the selling points of the NCAA was play against older players, play against bigger, stronger players, which will still be kind of true. But I mean, as they recruit more and more of these young players, that changes the dynamic in the NCAA too. So you're not playing against as many older and stronger players. It's less a men's league as they recruit more of these younger players. So we'll see how this plays out long term. But definitely, if Barch does decide to go next year, which we're still a little bit unclear on, I wouldn't be shocked if he shows up in London. But if he does, that's a huge red flag for the OHL for sure.
Barch, Reed, Noling on the ice. Off the ice, the Guelph Storm getting an upgrade that any fan that's ever seen a game at the Sleeman Center knows that they need it, and that is on the scoreboard, video board, score clock, whatever you call the big thing that shows all the stuff. They were desperate for a new scoreboard there at the Sleeman Center. They're getting one. And meantime, the private equity firm, well, I guess this is actually the city of Owen Sound because they own the Harry Lumley Bayshore Community Center and the arena where the Attack play, but 1,800, so about half of the seats, I would say, in the Bayshore being upgraded and a new ice cover system being brought in as well. So it's back-to-back off seasons, Dan, where they've made some upgrades at the smallest rink in the Ontario Hockey League.
It's like everything that we've talked about, right? Like, you have to continually make these investments, and it's tough to swallow. It's tough for city councils. It's tough for boards of directors for these teams or whoever's making these calls because the price tag, the sticker shock is high, but you have to do it. You have to do it, and you have to stay on top of that curve because every year you go without making those renovations, you need that many more the following year. So got to do it incrementally. So good on Owen Sound for those upgrades.
I thought I'd just take a moment as well to acknowledge the OHL'ers who just became Calder Cup champions, and those would include fellows by the name of Landon Sim, Easton Cowan, a couple of former London Knights there. Michael Pezzetta is another name that jumps off the page to me. And then, of course, we've got Dakota Murmis, another former Knight and Oshawa General. Ben Danford wins the Calder Cup as well. I might be missing one or two along the way here, but I'm just scanning through that Calder Cup roster. The Toronto Marlies. Dan, can you give me hope as a Leafs fan that this is going to translate to something for the big club? You've been picking on poor Darren Radish already. Come on.
Okay, well, I'll give you this. So I heard a lot of people trying to diminish the win, saying, well, the AHL is won by veteran teams and the Marlies had the oldest roster in the AHL and yada, yada, yada. But you just listed a number that are actually legit prospects. And winning the Calder Cup is never small potatoes. I mean, it's a tough trophy to win. And if you do it and do it on the backs of, I believe, Easton Cowan, if I'm not mistaken, led the playoffs in scoring. So that's a very positive sign, and the fact that you could have a guy like Ben Danford step in and play big minutes on the D as well. So yes, you definitely should extract hope from this win, Farwell.
Dan and I have looked at the landscape and we have taken our geography lessons to decide where we think the OHL will expand, because we know it is expanding, but where will those markets ultimately be? We'll get into that. Plus, the NHL draft coming up this weekend. What OHL'ers are on our minds as that NHL draft approaches? That's also still to come. So stay with us this week on the OHL podcast. It all comes down to this: a best of 7 battle, and DraftKings has you covered every step of the way. The DraftKings Sports app is now available in all 50 states and includes all markets. Sweat every shift of the series, all in one place with one app. New DraftKings customers sign up with code THPN and spend $5 to get $200 in rewards within 21 days. That's code THPN in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours. Dan, last week on this show, we were able to talk about the OHL draft, which has now come and gone. Now we get to look ahead to the NHL draft, which is this coming weekend, and the OHL'ers that are standing out to us kind of at a high level way. I see a couple of guys from the OHL that we've enjoyed watching for a couple of seasons that are likely to go top 5 this coming weekend, and a handful, 5, 6, maybe a 7th sneaking into the first round. But the OHL appears to be relatively well represented as we look ahead to this weekend's NHL draft.
It really does. And, some might look at it and say, well, maybe messy or uneven years or injury prone years from a couple players have dropped their status. We look at you, Ethan Pilchitz. We just talked about Ryan Rubrick. And then you see those players. I mean, I'd even include Oscar Hemming, who never played in the OHL, but was supposed to be an OHL prospect before his year went south due to off ice issues. All those players may be losing some draft status as a result. And despite that, we still have so many OHLers. I mean, there's still talk of Chase Reed going potentially in the top 3, definitely top 5 or 6. Might be the first OHLer off the board. We'll see. But you have all these high-end players and some really interesting names, I guess. Some intriguing names have moved up, like Ryder Cali. Where does he go? I mean, I've seen some buzz of him in the first round now. It's just been a good year for the OHL for all around profile players, like guys that will intrigue NHL teams based on their all around games. So you hear about Gavin McKenna off the top, and Stenberg, and these players that are in the top, and Verhoof. But there's some players in this OHL crop that are going to flood in behind that group and really surprise with how high they go, I think.
I've been hearing some rumblings that Chase Reed could go as high as 2nd, right behind the consensus number 1 in Gavin McKenna. And that would be because the San Jose Sharks don't necessarily need another high octane offensive player like Stenberg. So maybe Reed comes in there to be a piece on the Sharks blue line for the future. It also appears as though Malhotra will be a top 5. It's hard to imagine him not landing in Vancouver, but we'll see how that all sorts out. Other names that seem to be agreed upon as first rounders: Brooks Rogowski, maybe late in the first round, Adam Novotny, Nikita Klepov, and then you mentioned Belchez as well. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about both Belchez and Oscar Hemming, because you talk about those off ice issues with Hemming. It's not behavioral or anything like that. He just got caught in a quagmire of hockey politics, really. Ended up at Boston College. Didn't play a ton, like full half season. He was still kind of hanging around the Ontario Hockey League and the Kitchener Rangers, and still finds himself in the conversation as a first rounder. And the Belchez one is so interesting. He is, by all accounts, fully healed from that clavicle shoulder injury. And a guy of his size is just almost impossible to move off the puck or away from the net when he's working down low. You just have to wonder a little bit, because it's the second significant injury in just his 2 years of junior hockey. Is there a fragility concern when it comes to Ethan Belchez? And I'm not going to say that to the guy's face, because he'll squash me. We know that he's a big man, but those two are very intriguing picks to me, wherever they end up going, probably somewhere between 10 and 20.
Yeah, and to me it's a bit crazy because I understand it. You get into injury cycles with these players, and some of these teams just can't afford to use their top 10 pick on a guy that has question marks, which is a shame because I think by any measure Ethan Belchez is up there. So when you're starting to get into the 10-20 range, you have to start thinking, oh, this is crazy to leave this guy out there because we're unsure about an injury he had, which is now fully healed. So it'll cost them some spots for sure. Those players will drop. The Hemming case is another one where he probably would have been flirting with definitely top 5 to 10. We'll probably slide into the teens. We'll see. And I would even put Rubrick in that as well. Like there's a player whose profile probably, like for the longest time, he was thought of as the top 5 to 10 pick. And he's probably going to be low first, or as you mentioned, maybe slide right out of the first. So yeah, I think these discussions and debates are all things that these NHL teams have to have and have to decide. And we've seen, like we talked about Chase Reed, and I said he could be the first OHL'er off the board. I think we all expect Malhotra will be most likely to Vancouver at 3, but Reed could sneak in there. And if you look at those D at the top of that draft, you could make a case for Chase Reed as easily, in my opinion, as Verhoof and Carroll's out west. So we'll see. It's just what teams look for and what they need. But yeah, these NHL draft discussions get really interesting because it depends how many prospects you have in your cupboard. If you're a team that has several, maybe you can chance taking one of these injury prone guys a little higher. But most teams they get scared away.
I've already acknowledged that my tinfoil hat maybe needs a little bit of polish, or perhaps I should just set it aside and never put it back on again. But let me just try, and it might be less tinfoil hatty conspiracy theory ish than it is just more wild speculation. But let me play a what if game for you here, Dan. What if the Nashville Predators get off their damn wallets and sign Cameron Reed to the NHL contract that he deserves? That's me saying it. I know it's not my money, but come on, with the way this kid played, not only through the season, but his playoff and Memorial Cup was outstanding. So let's just say the Predators sign Cameron Reed, who we already talked about committed to Michigan. And let's just say Oscar Hemming, who went through everything that he went through and is still being seen as a first round NHL potential, gets picked. And then the Nashville Predators say to Cameron Reed, we see your development continuing best in the Ontario Hockey League. And oh, by the way, Oscar Hemming, now that you're our property, you're not going back to Boston College. You're going to the Ontario Hockey League. And all of a sudden, Dan, Kitchener Rangers fans are pretty damn happy, aren't they?
They are. They absolutely are. I'd be shocked if either happened only from a development standpoint. So the Nashville Predators will probably have some options with the new CBA terms rolling out and being able to send 19-year-olds to the AHL if that comes to fruition. So they'll have a few options. And the other thing is with kids going to the NCAA, it extends the window now for the NHL teams to sign them. So they wouldn't necessarily have to rush that ELC for Cameron Reed. They could have good discussions with his camp and say, yes, we want you in Michigan. Well, obviously, we can't put pen to paper till after this year, but I think that's far more likely than saying, yeah, we want you back in the OHL for a 4th year. Crazier things have happened. And similarly with Oscar Hemming, too, is he's already, like you mentioned, got at least that part season in at Boston College. And if it could be seen by many as a step back for him to come at this stage and play in junior. So I would be surprised, but like you said, crazier things have happened.
One more name I want to bring up, and I'm bringing it up in the context of sort of looking at the highest end first round players that we might see from the OHL going to the NHL. And you're going to hear a lot about this, so forgive the repetition. Anybody following this podcast has probably heard the story of Jackson Cover, who until just 5 years ago was playing roller hockey at home in the Cayman Islands. Let that sink in. A guy playing roller hockey until 5 years ago. So 5 years on skates on the ice, and some buzz that maybe he's a late first round pick. I suspect he'll go in the second, but either way, Jackson Cover is a whale of a story. And whenever he gets picked, you're going to hear a lot about the roller hockey past, etc. But what a trajectory this young man has been on, playing, of course, for the London Knights.
Yeah, I was going to mention him as a potential first rounder because I would not be shocked at all. Once this draft, when I look at this draft, I see a fairly balanced draft, and it just takes one team to really like you. So I see once you get past about 20, I think we're going to see a bit of a crapshoot and a lot of surprises. We're going to see kids ranked 40 something on central lists jump up to 25, like we've seen in a few of the past years. So that's all it takes. And someone's going to like that physical package that Cover offers. And I will not bat an eye if he's drafted, 25 to 30 this year. But like you said, at worst case, it's going to be kind of the first half of the second round. He's terrific story. All the physical tools. You can't teach that. You can't teach that scoring. The other parts of his game, which are growing, like the defensive side, the maturity, teams know they can deal with that. So Cover will be a relatively hot commodity this draft. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's another OHLer in that first round.
Speaking of defense, and again, I'm playing the hometown card here, but it's somebody that you and I have been talking about a little bit here on the podcast through the season because we've really liked watching his game developed, and it has grown this season. And off the show too, we text back and forth. We see each other at rinks, and this kid's name came up when I was at the Memorial Cup, Dan, and I ran into a scout whose team has a late second round pick. And this scout's perspective was, I don't think he's still going to be around when we get to our late second round pick. And I always had this guy kind of penciled in as a third rounder. I'm talking about Alexander Bilecki, but this scout that I ran into at the Memorial Cup is not the only one projecting Bilecki for being a second round pick now this coming weekend. And that is absolutely an upward trajectory from where he had been prior to a real fine season and an even better playoff for the kid.
Yeah, again, scouts really pay more and more attention later in the year, right? Especially once you get into playoffs. And by the time you got to the Memorial Cup and the OHL Championship Series, there were very few kids still playing hockey. And this kid was getting a spotlight every night with a lot of eyes on him. And he was acquitting himself better than he had all year. So those things are noticed by scouts. And I think that championship pedigree, the fact that I heard a few scouts reference the fact that he was handling power play duties on a Memorial Cup level team in his draft year. So that those things all go a long way to increasing your draft stock. And I'm with you. Like if you'd asked me at the start of the year, I would have said, yeah, fourth, fifth rounder. By mid-year, yeah, probably third, fourth rounder. Then after that playoffs and Memorial Cup, yeah, for sure. Second round has to be absolutely reasonable slot for him. Someone's going to love his game. He's big, he's fast, he plays with maturity, he's got that skill. There's warts in all these kids' games. I mean, his defensive game improved. Started to limit the turnovers and giveaways, and his reads. He's really aggressive at jumping up into the ice. So. But NHL teams love that. They say this is a kid that knows when to go, knows when to join the rush. We can teach him how to pick his spots a little better. So yeah, all this to say, Alexander Bilecki is another kid I fully expect to probably go second round.
We could see upwards of 15 OHLers in the first 60 picks or so. So that would be, a quarter of them going in the first two rounds. We'll keep our eyes on it. It's going to be a pretty good crop of OHLers going relatively high this weekend when it comes to the NHL draft. Just one more thing, and this is completely off the books of the Ontario Hockey League, and it's got nothing to do with people within the game that we talk to, but I'm hearing some buzz from Leafs fans, Dan, and I know how much you love to pound on my Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm gonna serve the meatball to you right now. But some of the fans are suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the Leafs could get a pretty nice package if they move that first overall pick, drop down, get players and another slightly later first round pick instead of taking Gavin McKenna. Any chance you see the Leafs trading the first pick this weekend?
I say there's a less than 0% chance, Mike. I can assure you Gavin McKenna will be a Maple Leaf in a week's time. No doubt, zero chance. However, one little tiny asterisk, had Brad Tree Living still been in the chair, I'm not so sure. I think that might have been a high probability. So
All right. I'm with Dan on this. I don't think they're going to move that pick. And even though Dan hates former Erie Otter Darren Radish, don't worry about it, Rads. We like it that you're coming to our team there. Ben Danford, Easton Cowan just winning that Calder Cup. Maybe they get elevated. I'm hearing some rumblings about Vincent Trocheck, too, another former OHLer from Saginaw that might end up in Toronto, too, Dan. Maybe that's the secret ingredient we in Toronto as Leafs fans have been missing for 60 years now.
well, when you look at that very high end group that the Leafs are going to have, if you add a really good second line center like that, what the Leafs have to be careful about is, what are they building towards here? They're building towards that age core of Austin Matthews, or are they building something new around McKenna? Because once you start bringing in a 33-year-old Trocheck, you're saying, oh, we're trying to win in the next couple of years and then figuring it out. So we'll see. I've heard a few rumblings around the Leafs. It looks like the new GM is going to be very aggressive. So, but for the record, I am pro Darren Radish.
I shouldn't give you such a hard time. You just called him fine. You didn't say you hated him. Okay. Speaking of Toronto, the Ontario Hockey League maintains its footprint in the GTA. Might that footprint get a little bit larger? Dan and I think so. We have looked at the landscape. We have agreed upon 4 markets where we believe the Ontario Hockey League will expand. Are you with us or are you against us? We'll talk about expansion in the O coming up. Stay with us on the OHL podcast. Dan, somebody that you and I have talked about before is Greg Cowan, who writes for the Owen Sound Sun-Times, covering the Attack, of course. He is our favorite OHL X follow. And if you're not following Greg Cowan ST for Sun-Times, and you're an OHL fan, then you are not doing the OHL properly. This guy is an absolute riot. I take only about half, maybe less than half of what he says seriously, but I know because he's a very good reporter. He covers the Attack very well. And once you get to understand the shtick, you can separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will. His real stuff is real and it's real good. And his sarcastic, fun stuff is very sarcastic and a whole heck of a lot of fun. And so one of Greg's great posts this past week was the discovery, looking at the OHL website and the list of teams. There were 4 blank spots that suddenly showed up some way, somehow. And Greg, doing my best tinfoil hat impression, posted this. Like, he didn't send the league an email or check out behind the scenes. He just posts this online and says, hey, look, OHL fans, there are 4 empty spots in the OHL teams list. Like, there's a spot there for another team's logo. What could this possibly mean? Has the league already determined the markets that it's going to expand to, and we're just waiting to fill those blank spots in with new logos? No, Greg Cowan ST. It's not that. It's just because the league was making room for, or whatever site that you found, or whatever it looked like, the glitch in the matrix was waiting for those lovely crossover league games that Dan and I like so much. So eventually some Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League teams will show up in the OHL standings. Don't even get me started about how stupid that is. I hate it. But anyway, that's what the glitch in the matrix was. It had nothing to do with anything else. That's a long way around. Just, I wanted to remind you of Greg. He's a lot of fun on X. He's a great guy around the league. But we know this. We know that the Ontario Hockey League is going to expand. It seems generally understood that a 24-team league is the size of league that OHL Commissioner Brian Crawford would like. So that leaves room for 4 expansion teams. Dan and I have gone back and forth. We've broken it down. We've looked at the landscape, and we have determined where those 4 markets will be. Let's start, Dan, in Burlington. This is where the GTA footprint, if you will, might get a little bit bigger. Not exactly in the GTA geographically, but very close. It's a Hamilton suburb almost at this point, just a little bit further east, but nonetheless. And the conversation in the past week, a $300 million hotel, convention center, arena project that would include an OHL sized arena of between 5,000 and 7,000 seats. You think this might be the signal that Burlington could be one of those 4 new OHL markets?
Yeah, I know you and I talked this through a lot, and there's pros and cons to every market. But the reason I kept circling back to Burlington is, well, what's the biggest barrier? The biggest barrier on all these markets is the arena. They're already well down that path, right? We're talking about some pre-approvals for some design work and some conceptual work and costing coming back to council in early 2027. Looks like there's lots of support there. It is, we know, probably the wealthiest region in Ontario. Lots of wealth there, lots of ability, corporate support, ability to sustain it. We look at the hockey culture there. If you scan OHL rosters, Mike, you will see a staggering number of players, or even through the draft, a staggering number of players from that Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington corridor, right? That GTA West stretch. And then if you look at just geographics of how it plays into league, so we know the league wants a bigger GTA footprint. Yes, Burlington's a little on the outskirts of the GTA technically, but it's still in that GTA proper, if you will. And then you look at the alignment of, we talk about trying to figure out east versus west. Well, Burlington slides into that place where you could put them in the east or west. I know people are going to think, come on, Burlington's southwest Ontario. I know, but so is Brantford, so is Niagara. It's located in a district where you have some play. So I think all of those things considered, the fact that the biggest hurdle they're down the pathway on, they have a hockey area and district, they have the money, it's in a region they're anxious to fit a team into, and it has all kinds of natural rivalries within an hour. For me, Burlington is just jumping out at me as a natural fit.
I can really get behind this idea, Dan, and particularly the geography of it kind of being on the fringe of that Greater Toronto area that we talk about so much. And let's face it, when we talk about the teams right in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, Brampton, Mississauga, the former Toronto St. Mike's, it's just never really caught on because we know, and I'll go back to what we talked about earlier. I'm one of those, you know, long suffering Leafs fans in the Greater Toronto area. They seem to love their Leafs. I think Burlington puts you just enough on the outside of that to be a very viable OHL market. And the money that you talk about, spot on. If not there, where would you go?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, so first, to your first point, you touch on like these communities that succeed in the OHL tend to have a little bit more of a community identity than, not to slag on Newmarket and Vaughan and King City and all these North Toronto, North GTA regions, but Burlington has a fairly old school community identity, which helps. But the other, you're talking about the money and the fit. One other point I just want to point out too is this complex that they're talking about is going to be built, for those that know the area, built right near the Aldershot GO station, like access to transit, access to ease of access for all kinds of audiences. So yeah, I think when you look at the checklist of things you'd like to see for an OHL team, they check more than any at present day.
Okay, so we know 4 teams is the desire to be added to the Ontario Hockey League. We're going to go through them alphabetically. We've started with Burlington. That's what we here on the OHL podcast believe is a next viable OHL market. Funny you should mention Newmarket, Dan, because for a minute, if you blinked, you missed the era of the Newmarket Royals in the Ontario Hockey League. But the Newmarket Royals followed the Cornwall Royals, and then, of course, went to Sarnia. But let's go back to Cornwall. And I know that I am wearing my heart on my sleeve with this because I've long been on the bring back the Royals bandwagon. But We've got, and I'm gonna leave the Cornwall Aces out of this. I know it wasn't a good end to hockey in Cornwall, but going back to the Royals, you've got a proud and successful franchise. And I'm sorry, heart on my sleeve or not, I don't think you go to Cornwall for regular season games like the league is doing this year without an intention of, you're not just dipping your toe in the market, you're testing the full on waters there to find out how warm they are. And we talked about Burlington, what is being built. Cornwall already has the arena. Is it OHL standard right now? No, but the bones are there. So you've got the arena. You just need to make the necessary additions and updates to it to make it OHL ready today. The council in Cornwall has expressed its desire to get behind this. I know we'll have to see some private money come in, and I know the economy in Cornwall isn't the greatest, but you want to talk about a team that fits nicely geographically into that Eastern Conference, brings in some natural rivalries, has a great history of hockey at this level. Dan and I think, are agreed that we're staking our claim on Cornwall as being one of those expansion markets.
Yeah, and compared to Burlington, I think there's a few more boxes that need to be checked before Cornwall can be viable. But I think it still is well down that road, and a lot of reasons. I think to me the strongest case is when you look to try and expand your footprint in Eastern Ontario and get a stronger base of teams there. The options become a little more limited for a few reasons, but Cornwall has to be considered one of the top of the list just based on track record in that city of having OHL teams, a current desire to. We've seen some explorations around the arena there already. We've seen a will in that market. They want it. But like you said, I think the strongest argument is just the geography. Right at the eastern corner of Ontario, natural rival for Ottawa and Kingston, and even pushing further towards Peterborough and Oshawa. But it gives you at the corners of your province, if you will, it gives you another market that's viable, uh, some nostalgia and some history there. So again, a few more things that have to be ticked off that list to make Cornwall a reality. But I think, yeah, like you said, for us, it's right up near the top of that list.
I don't know who taught me the alphabet, but I should have gone this next one first. Anyway, we've got Burlington, we've got Cornwall, we have another C, and I just did my alphabet very poorly. But this next one that Dan and I believe will be an OHL expansion market. Maybe it's because we got a really good glimpse into the OHL's plans for expansion when Commissioner Brian Crawford appeared before this council, and we could all listen in to a public municipal council meeting and hear the OHL's plans. It's been talked about so much. If there was one negative aspect to this for me, it would be that you are adding a team to an area that's got almost a glut of teams. And that might be like, that's the only asterisk I would throw against this one. But for me, it's been talked about for far too long. Council has already begun after that presentation by OHL Commissioner Brian Crawford. They've begun the process of exploring the viability of building the arena that would need to be built to support an OHL team. And of course, now we're talking about the city of Chatham, Dan Mahar.
Yeah, I wasn't going to call you on the alphabet, Farwell. Like, I mean, some might argue Chatham comes alphabetically before Cornwall. I mean, it's a matter of opinion. We'll take your
Sure, it
emails on the
is.
OHL podcast. But yeah, and the market of Chatham, I've heard some really polarized opinions on Chatham. Some in the area say that it'll never happen. They don't have the money. The arena is a bit of a joke. Yada yada. Your point about the glut of teams in the area, Sarnia, Windsor, London's not terribly far. Even look at Saginaw and Flint, not that far. But I look at that as a good thing. I mean, yes, you might worry a little bit about the drawing power because I'm sure a lot of current Chatham residents, head up the road to Windsor, Sarnia, London to see a game. So do you have the drawing power? I think Chatham has a pretty rich sporting history. And I look across the way to the baseball diamonds right now, and the Chatham Kent Barnstormers now in the Canadian Baseball League came in as an expansion franchise and succeeding very well supported. It's a sporting area, and you look at the Chatham Maroons and the success they've had. I think there's a strong base of support there. Definitely some things to check off in terms of the arena, but as we saw with Commissioner Brian Crawford's visit, they've already started to have those discussions. And to me, the best sign is it wasn't a non-starter. Oh yeah, we're too far from where we need to be. It was like, okay, now we know. Let's start doing the background work. So I don't look at the glut of teams as a big barrier. I look at that as a good thing. Strong rivalries, all those things. But yeah, I think Chatham again is getting close to viable as one of our top markets.
Okay, so alphabetically, we've got Burlington, we've got Chatham, we've got Cornwall. I know my alphabet is right as we add the fourth and final expansion team. These are the teams that Dan and I, collectively as the OHL podcast, are putting our stamp of expansion approval on. The league will, according to us, expand into Burlington, Chatham, Cornwall, and I love me this one, Dan. I am right beside you on it. Let's bring in another state. We're going to cross the border. We're going to expand on Pennsylvania and Michigan, and we are going to add New York State via Niagara Falls.
Yeah, this one I think intrigued both you and I when we first heard buzz about it, right? And like we talked about, again, the things that you need in place. Obviously, the arena being top of the list, and not far behind it would be a viable ownership group, which we've heard about in Niagara Falls, New York, right? A fairly uh, aggressive, robust, interested investor group that wants to do this and wants to put money into the arena site there. Right across the border, so easy enough to draw some of the Canadian market. Huge natural rivalries, I should say, with Erie and Niagara, and that whole corridor. Not far away, not a long drive. Gets you territory in New York State. It checks just a whole bunch of boxes for the OHL, and given that they're relatively well down the road in terms of the pieces and components you need to bring in. I'm all for it. I think it's a strong market, gives us another American partner in the mix in a different state, and a lot of the prep work has already been done. So yeah, I'm behind Niagara Falls, New York.
Yeah, and let's be honest, the Ontario Hockey League, I think, would love to put its footprint into another US state, right? Let's, along with Michigan State and Pennsylvania, add New York State to the mix. That to me is probably the most intriguing part of the possibility. And look, we're talking here, Dan, about uh, four markets that we believe make perhaps the most sense: Burlington, Chatham, Cornwall, Niagara Falls. Vaughn is looking at that new arena. There will be others. And I don't know that it's necessarily, and I hope it doesn't turn into just a race to whoever gets the OHL ready arena finished first. Like I think the league will be a little bit more selective than that, but some hopeful markets will be left on the outside looking in when the dust settles on all of this.
That's for sure, and you're absolutely right. I hope that they do the due diligence on the right reasons to bring a market in, because if I were to look at the four markets we just talked about and say, well, where do we see a wrench being thrown in? And for me, it would be that I feel like Commissioner Crawford in the OHL is really eager in something North GTA, the Vaughan area, and not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but we know it's fraught with some challenges from the past, right? That community identity, that are they going to support junior heavily in the Leafs market, all those things. So, but money does talk, and we know that there will be money in that area too. So, do it for the right reasons. Do your proper viability assessments, and it's important to get this right, because the last thing you want to do is expand and be talking within the next 5 years, oh, this isn't working.
Burlington, Chatham, Cornwall, Niagara Falls, New York. That's where the OHL podcast thinks this league will expand. Comments, ideas of your own, email us anytime, ohlpodcast@rogers.com. One more thing on expansion, Dan, and this will inevitably come up as a concern, and I get it. I will just preface by saying I think four more teams is a right sized approach. I think 24 teams in the Ontario Hockey League loop is okay, but the concerns will be raised about the dilution of talent.
Yeah, of course. That's the obvious counter argument when you look at all angles of this, and you should look at those angles. What I will say is, when you look at 300 deep in the OHL draft. You look at the U18 draft, you look at these development camps going on this week. There's an awful lot of talent out there. And as you expand, particularly into New York State, and you have a lot of strong American markets, you expand your reach to of players that might want to come play in your league. And we see a number of American born kids at these development camps this week looking to play in the OHL for at least a couple of years. So I'm not as concerned about the dilution of talent piece, especially if we're going to continue to lose players to the NCAA earlier. Then you might have to expand your reach for some of the younger players too. So I think it's less of a concern than some think, but it's definitely something you have to look into too, because you don't want the quality of the league to drop. So I would be very, very hesitant to go beyond 24 teams. I'm with you that I think that's right sized.
That man right there is Dan Mahar. You'll find him on X at his name, Dan Mahar. I am on X at Farwell_OHL. Together we make up the OHL podcast, and we've got one more episode before the summer break. Enjoy the NHL draft this weekend ahead. Dan and I will recap it, talk about those OHLers, see how our forecasts from this episode stand up after we watch the draft this weekend along with you. And we'll talk more. Another episode comes your way next Tuesday morning. This is the OHL Podcast.